What's up, everybody? This is Rich with Lifetime Shred, and today we're going to be kicking off a new ongoing segment I'm planning on doing called Tips of 3. So Tips of 3, it's basically just 3 tips related to something in wakeboarding that I want to share out. It's not an exhaustive list, but as you're listening to this video, if you have other ideas, feel free to comment that below related to this topic. So anyway, getting into the topic today, how to stay warm in the fall. It's getting cold out. Riding's winding down around much of the U.S. and anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere right now. But there's still some time left to go, whether that's at the cable park or out on the boat, and you're probably in a wetsuit. So how do you get the most out of that wetsuit if it's just not feeling warm enough? Like, obviously, you could always upgrade that wetsuit, but that might not be an option. What got me thinking about this, in addition to the colder weather here in Utah, we've got snow up in the mountains right now, was a thread in the Wake subreddit. So just talking about, how can I get a little more out of my wetsuit? So tip number 1. In addition to your wetsuit, you might want to wear some wind-blocking fabric outside of that wetsuit. So you see a lot of pro riders doing this, wearing something like a windbreaker or wake pants or both over the top of their wetsuit. And this functions almost like a layering system. And I covered this a little bit in the wake pant video I made. But basically, you have something like, I wear this Mystic windbreaker. It doesn't have to be like a Wake brand or anything. It's just pretty standard polyester windbreaker. And the wind's going to come in, it's going to get blocked from hitting the wetsuit, and the wetsuit's allowed to do what it does well, which is hold that very thin layer of water against your skin that's heated by your body so that you stay warm. So, what I've noticed in the past is if you are just wearing a wetsuit and it's a windy day and that wind's coming across in the suit, when you're out wakeboarding, it's really not that bad, but once you stop riding, if you keep that wetsuit on, you just get cold right away. Right, because that wind's just like blowing into the suit, and it's not allowing the neoprene to do what it does well. So that's where a wind-breaking layer can go a long way. So whether you're on the cable all day and you're rocking this wind layer to keep the wetsuit working well, or maybe you're sitting in the boat between sets and you don't want to take your wetsuit off, throw a windbreaker layer on. It's going to go a long ways, and you could wear a windbreaker top. You could also rock some wake pants, which I like to do. Even with like the wake pants and the windbreaker on, it's more fabric and it's going to feel like you're not able to move as well, but you can still move decently well because this stuff's all pretty lightweight, and then hopefully your wetsuit has a good amount of stretch in it as well, and it's going to stop that wind from coming in. It's going to keep you a little bit warmer. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, the word dry. So this is going to be maybe a couple of sub-tips in one, but when you use your wetsuit, when you're done with it, you got to dry it out, the inside and the outside. So what I like to do for this is I have a fan, this guy right here. I plug this in, and I make sure my wetsuit is inside out, or I leave it out in the sun if it's like warmer out. But if it's colder out, like it might not dry very well out in the sun outside. So you want to hang it somewhere dry in your house, maybe in a cellar with a concrete floor, because it is going to drip water, so just be mindful of that. But make sure it gets dry, the whole thing, on the inside, and then flip it so the outside's on the outside, and make sure that gets fully dry, because you want to start your day with a dry wetsuit. If you don't do that, you're going to be cold right away, especially if you're out there riding and it's like 45 degrees Fahrenheit, gray, windy. Like, you can have a great time on a day like that if the water's flat. But if you're cold all the time and you're shivering, you're just not going to ride well. So make sure you start with a dry wetsuit. Now, in addition to that, more with this word dry, if you have the chance to have 2 wetsuits and you're riding boat in particular, take the first wetsuit off as soon as you get out of the water, put on some dry clothes while you're watching other people go through their sets, and then for your second set, throw a second wetsuit on. It's going to blow your mind how much warmer you're going to be instead of sitting in that wetsuit and tough it out. If you only have one wetsuit, again, like trying to stay dry to allow the body to do its warmth thing, take the top of the wetsuit down to your waist and then put dry clothes on the upper half. That's going to allow your core to warm up, because the thing about the neoprene that I've experienced is if you're not actually up and moving, after a while, that heating capability of neoprene starts to go away, especially if the wind's hitting too. It's just like blowing away, the heat off your body. So that's tip number 2. Make sure your wetsuit's dry and stay as dry as possible, as often as possible, especially if you're out on the boat. At the cable, it's a little bit harder because you might be just there for, 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes out on the lake. and then you take maybe a 15-20 minute break, and then you're out and you're back and forth. So you wouldn't have enough wetsuits to make that really doable. But even then, if you're going to be chilling on the shore at the cable park for a bit, take off at least the upper half of your wetsuit and get dry, get warm, get some layers going on there. Tip number 3, maybe my favorite tip, I don't know, get a wake beanie. So I've got 2 of these. They're just like Mystic makes them. And these things are awesome. You know, a lot of stuff in kiteboarding is really awesome. And if you look at that kiteboarding gear and you bring it over to wakeboarding, you're going to gain a lot. So, you know, Mystic makes kiteboarding gear. They also make wakeboarding gear, but I think stuff like this is probably more oriented to the kiteboarding side, but you're starting to see it more on the wake too. But this thing, you know, you waste so much heat out of the top of your head. So if you're out on the lake and you're riding, like when I throw one of these things on, like I notice immediately I'm much warmer and almost like too hot sometimes. Like it's always a question of like, you know, I might want the wake beanie at the beginning of the set, but halfway through it's going to be too hot. And if it's too hot, you just chuck it in the boat. And these are made out of neoprene, so they're going to have a lot of that same heat-retaining quality that like a wetsuit's going to have. And one thing I'll say with this, and I'll just throw this up here, I do like to keep the bottom, one thing I'll say, I do like to keep the bottom of the ear exposed on this. If I go all the way down, I can't hear stuff as well. I've never experienced, but I have some friends that have where like you get like a slap on the side and if your ear isn't opened up there, I don't know, it's just a weird experience. So I like to rock it like that with the ear exposed a little on the bottom. And then if you're at the cable park too, I'll actually rock this under my helmet, kind of like a lot of snowboarders do. And I think you still get pretty good protection. I mean, this is almost like it's a pretty tight-fitting beanie. I do have a big dome, but it's going to keep you warm out on the cable longer, and you're just going to have a good day. And I actually keep 2 of these, especially when I'm out riding boat. So if it's really cold out, I'm rocking a wetsuit with a windbreaker over the top and a fresh beanie. So I'm going out into the water dry. And then for set 2, I mean, I might rock that same windbreaker again, but second wetsuit and beanie. And that would be like on the coldest possible days. Anyway, that's this tip of 3. I've got a laundry list of these coming up, but if you have any ideas of things you'd like me to just cover a few tips on from my, you know, a couple decades of riding experience, I'd love to hear that in the comments below. Otherwise, hopefully this was useful. Hopefully this keeps you a little bit warmer out there as the season's winding down here. And we'll catch you later. Have a great one. Bye.